on Red Green Goggles and Steve Rubin on the Green White Tokens.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like the players are ready, so let's go down to round 5. And here we are for round 5 of the Magic Online Championship Series. Alexander Ivanov, Red Green Goggles ramp versus Bernardo Santos, Green White Tokens. You guys can see the players there getting ready for their match. And of course, at this point, all the players have the deck lists of each other. So how do you think this is going to play out? Green White Tokens, Red Green Goggles ramp. I know you said the Green White Tokens was probably the best deck in Standard currently.
And I think it's reasonably ahead here. It's kind of surprising because historically decks like Ramp are good against like mid-range green-white decks, but it turns out that Gideon is one of the more threatening cards against the Ramp deck, and then Archangel Avacyn is a really good way to close out the game while also ignoring cards like Kozilek's Return. So we've seen green-white triumph against Ramp. Most of the times we've seen this matchup play out. How this we'll find out how this will go.
Yeah, this should be an interesting match. I'm excited to see if the players, play as you say. All right, opening hand here. Looks like both players have a decent number of spells and lands. Do you think these are both keeps?
Certainly Bernardo is going to keep his hand because he's got Lambholt Pacifist on 2 and then Dromoka's Command. It's not a very exciting hand, but at least the combo of making Pacifist into a 4/4 and attacking with it is a very relevant one. Also, the Ramp deck might not have a play on turn 2. Alexander did have to mulligan his hand. It had no red mana, and right now it actually looks like the Lambholt Pacifist is going to do some good work here. It is a werewolf, and if Bernardo gets to play it on turn 2 and then Alexander doesn't have a 2-drop, it just flips into a 4/4. All of a sudden, you get 2 mana 4/4, which is very good carding constructed.
Yeah, do you think it's worth it for Alexander at that point to maybe just Fiery Impulse to make it not transform?
He may do that, though. It looks like he's considering Fiery Impulsing end of turn, which I would probably not advise. I think that your play of playing a Fiery Impulse here, it's not one I would relish making, but I don't know that Fiery Impulse is going to get better. There aren't that many targets in the green and white deck, so it's a kind of interesting play that I think most players wouldn't do, but it might have worked out here.
All right, well, as you said, the Lambholt Pacifist is transforming into that Lambholt Butcher. 4/4 can attack. Pretty nice here, and that Dromoka's Command in Bernardo's hands kind of a catch-all, and it's especially good, it seems, versus the Red-Green Goggles deck. It can kind of neuter one of their burn spells.
It can stop. You can stop a burn spell from going off, especially effective against something like Fall of the Titans, and it can also, depending on the situation, fight one of the blockers out of the way. Overall, it's not the most effective card in the deck, but it looks like it's going to be decent here. It also has synergy with Hangerback Walker, putting a ++1 counter on Hangerback and making it make more Thopters when it dies.
Bernardo's follow-up Hangerback Walker for 1. Alexander is drawing some lands now, and it looks like he might be leading either with the Nissa's Pilgrimage or the Tireless Tracker. Only problem with leaving out the Tracker on turn 3 is that you don't get the immediate value because you're not able to play a land, of course.
And then, unfortunately for Alexander, if he does play the Tracker, Dromoka's Command is most likely going to let the Butcher handle the Tracker with ease.
So what is Alexander's game plan at this point, trying to recover from this fast start?
His best shot is to play as fast a World Breaker as he can, and that usually will come with ramp spells. Looks like he is leading with the Tracker. Well, or not. And either way, he wants to play a setup playing Hedron Archive next turn. I kind of like the idea of playing Pilgrimage, and then next turn you can go Archive plus Tracker or Archive plus Fiery Impulse, and that plays 2 spells, which makes the Lambholt Butcher flip back into Lambholt Pacifist.
Great point, of course. 2 spells being cast is going to transform that werewolf. If Bernardo is able to find another creature with power 4 or greater, then the Lambholt Pacifist would be able to attack, of course, but it looks like he's just drawing lands for now, so we might actually make a game of this one yet.
Yeah, and Bernardo, he doesn't have as much follow-up. If he had like a Gideon this turn, that would have been huge. Instead, his turn is to just pump Hangerback Walker and play a land, and that's not the most exciting set of turns.
And a main phase activation, actually, of the Hangerback Walker. That makes a lot of sense versus the burn deck.
Right, if you don't think you're going to use it as a blocker, it's much safer to play at main phase.
All right. Well, looks like Alexander is going to go instead for the Tireless Tracker play.
And drawing Traverse the Ulvenwald worked out really nicely here because he's going to get to play Tireless Tracker, play a land, Traverse for another land. So now he's played 2 spells. Lambholt Pacifist, or Lambholt Butcher flips back into Pacifist. And then that Fiery Impulse now has Spell Mastery because of the 2 sorceries in the graveyard. The Dromoka's Command still very much in play here, though.
It looks like we're waiting on a response from Bernardo. Maybe he wants to use the Dromoka's Command.
And if he uses Dromoka's Command here, he could actually put a +1 counter on the Hangerback and then have it fight the Tireless Tracker, and that gives him 3 tokens. The downside is Alexander, slightly telegraphed the Fiery Impulse earlier in the game, and if he's still considering that card, then that might be a risky play.
Now, is this a little bit of a tell from Bernardo's side that he's waiting on this trigger to resolve?
I think so. If you're Alexander, you're trying to think, what could my opponent have? And Dromoka's Command is the obvious answer. That's a card that the green-white deck plays 4 of and is a really relevant instant speed interactive card.
We'll see if Bernardo actually wants to fire off that Dromoka's Command. It looks like he's going to. Like you mentioned, Fiery Temper, or rather, Fiery Impulse. A little bit of a tell earlier from Alexander's side, so we'll see if the Lambholt Butcher is the one that's going to be fighting here.
All right, so it looks like the Lambholt Butcher is getting the +1 counter, and the Hangerback is trying to fight. So that means Alexander could prevent the fight from happening by casting Fiery Impulse on the Hangerback, which would give Bernardo 2 tokens, and then he ends up with a 5/5 Butcher, which is then going to flip back because Alexander played 2 spells, but a 4/4 Lambholt Pacifist can still attack.
Mm-hmm.
It sees itself and decides, yep, that's good enough for me.
I think that's a really sweet play. Maybe a lot of people don't catch at first. If you're able to pump up the Lambholt Pacifist in any way, well, then it just immediately can start attacking by itself. Looks like Alexander is going to use that Fiery Impulse. Takes care of the Hangerback Walker. Going to bring 2 friends along, but that is going to keep the Tireless Tracker alive.
And are you supposed to say hello to the friends? Is that how it works?
Hello, friends, indeed. Multiple friends, though.
And now Traverse the Ulvenwald, not with Delirium, but still just gets a land to make sure that Alexander doesn't ever run short on land drops here.
And with a World Breaker in hand, I assume that's probably a good thing. We do know he has that Heatran to allow him to cast that.
And Bernardo is in one of the frustrating places of the game where he feels, and I think rightfully, that any spell could put this game away, but instead he just draws land after land. So he's in a spot where he is ahead right now, but soon he's not going to be.
All right, and tack in for 7 from Bernardo is going to make Alexander fall down to 6. Alexander with a pretty decent draw, I would say. Fall of the Titans. Unfortunately for him, he just got rid of both of his 1-mana spells.
And Fall of the Titans, of course, has its X red, deals X to 2 target creatures or players, and has Surge X red. So if you play any spell, you all of a sudden get to pay like 5 mana to deal 4 to 2 different targets, which is a very effective card.
All right, Alexander looks like he's happy to just pass the turn, maybe hold up the Fall of the Titans and those clue tokens.
And of course, Fall of the Titans, yes, as you point out, is an instant, which is often overlooked. The card doesn't look like an instant. One thing that Bernardo did, which is opening himself up to some extra risk, is he played the Westvale Abbey instead of just playing his basics. And playing Abbey before you have a chance to use it does open it up to getting World Breaker. So that is something that he may end up wishing he hadn't done.
All right, looks like all the creatures are going to attack Tireless Tracker, blocking the Lambholt Butcher, and both clues being sacrificed before damage is dealt, so that 5-power creatures should be able to trade off.
Yeah, and this is going to put Alexander down to 4, but that's not quite enough to get things done, though. A 3/3 Hangerback Walker is not a bad addition to the board.
And notably, Surge, only if you've cast another spell that turn, he cannot Surge it off of Bernardo casting a Hangerback Walker of his own. All right, some pretty hot cards in Alexander's hand. Chandra and Tormenting Voice, new additions, but it looks like he's just going to go for the World Breaker. And World Breaker conveniently says exile target artifact, enchantment, or land.
Yeah, so it devours that Hangerback Walker. Hangerback is exiled, doesn't make tokens. It has reach, so the Thopters could attack, but they only get 1 point of damage through. And now we see Bernardo really stalling out. I mean, again, he drew another land here, so Alexander, despite being under a ton of pressure, is going to have a hard time losing his last 4 life, just because Bernardo does not have a way to close things out. Of course, a Secure the Waste would be a huge draw.
It looks like he's going to have to sit back on that Westvale Abbey for now. Alexander, his deck a little bit slower, and he's able to start developing out his cards now. He has an important, 8 lands currently, and all of his spells being very, very expensive. This is going to help out a lot. Tormenting Voice finding another Chandra and a Goblin Dark Dwellers. What's the flavor behind Worldbreaker having reach?
If you look at the picture, it's got like a lot of arms, is my assumption.
Okay.
It's easy to break worlds when you have like tons of arms, and that has like so many arms.
So what kind of things is Alexander thinking about here? He did cast Tormenting Voice.
Well, he's got his whole hand ready. He can fall the Titans the 2 Doctors away, but that's less efficient than going Chandra -1. He can play a Goblin Dark Dwellers and replay something like Fiery Impulse or Tormenting Voice. He can traverse. It actually has four types now, so he could, if he wanted to, traverse and go and get like an Atarka or even like an Ulamog. But right now, Alexander's thinking, how do I beat Secure the Wastes? The answer is you probably don't. But luckily for him, Bernardo does not have a Secure the Wastes in his hand.
So in situations like these where you can't really afford to play around a card, you just have to go with your best option. And here it looks like Alexander thinks Goblin Dark Dwellers, potentially flashing back that Traverse the Ulvenwald you were talking about, might be the plan.
He could also Dark Dwellers back the Nissa's Pilgrimage if he wanted to. He's got 2 Fall the Titans and 2 Chandras, and he's got a really expensive hand, so getting extra lands into play doesn't sound unreasonable. And like you mentioned, you can't beat Secure the Waste, so you shouldn't really worry about it this turn.
All right, looks like he is going to target Traverse the Ulvenwald.
And with Delirium, that means he can get any creature or land from his deck here. And it looks like a second Worldbreaker, likely ready to start killing that Westvale Abbey. So Bernardo's behind here now, even though he's got a significant life total advantage. But if he draws a Secure the Waste, that's his best draw for sure. Forest's not super high on the list of best draws.
Yeah, Bernardo's only drawn a few spells. In fact, maybe only 1 spell this entire game. I think that Hangerback Walker might have been his only real draw step. Westvale Abbey producing a little bit of help, but looks like the bigger creatures of Alexander are really going to do some work here. Oh, and with that draw, I think Alexander's probably really confident with himself.
Yeah, Kozilek's Return does go a long way here, though. Again, my inclination would be to save it to try to counter a Secure the Wastes with it, because that is one of the easiest ways for you to lose the game.
We'll see what Alexander opts for. I think, again, players know their deck lists. Alexander realizes, of course, Green-White Tokens is going to be running Secure the Waste. He probably wants to hold on to that return.
Bernardo actually has 3, which is slightly higher than the average, so that is a lot of Secure the Wastes.
All right, Alexander is going to go with that Kozilek's Return, though. And bash in there for 9.
This does put Bernardo on a 1-turn clock, because Fall the Titans can finish the game off next turn. Also, Worldbreaker will trigger the Kozilek's Return. It'll happen again, and that'll wipe anything else out that Bernardo may have accumulated by then.
Of course, anytime Bernardo's tapping lands at the end of Alexander's turn, he's got to be thinking, no, Secure the Waste. But
Yep.
Luckily for him, it's just the Westvale Abbey activation. Of course, you do have to pay a life when you want to produce a 1/1 white and black human cleric token.
Looks like the Titans are going to fall here. So Bernardo's going to take 4, and the token is going to die.
And like you had mentioned earlier, Surge online because of that Kozilek's Return, so Fall of the Titans actually dealing that full 4 damage with his leftover mana. We'll see if Bernardo can pull anything out of this.
And I don't believe so. The draw of Dromoka's Command is not going to get it done.
All right, and Alexander takes the first game over Bernardo. Even though Bernardo was coming out of the gates pretty quickly, the flood out, of course, the problem there.
Yeah, I did catch up with him eventually.
You can see their players and their sideboarding options. All right, so what kind of things can you expect for the green-white tokens list to bring in?
They don't have a ton for this matchup, and that's partially because it is generally a good matchup for green-white. So, cards like Evolutionary Leap against Sweepers are reasonable, but for the most part, this deck doesn't need a ton of help. It's well set up to fight this matchup. I mean, you look at the sideboard and you see cards like Declaration of Stone, Hallowed Moonlight, Clipwings. They're just for the matchups that cause you more trouble than a deck that doesn't particularly have a great game plan against you. That being said, the red green deck is up a game, and now it gets to board in cards like if it would like cards like Dragonlord Atarka, maybe another Kozilek's Return or two, Chandra, just more sweepers, more ways to deal with the amount of creatures it has in play. Rending Volley also is a common sideboard card out of the red decks, which might be why Bernardo wants to cut an Abyssin or two, just because she is very vulnerable to Rending Volley.
Mm-hmm. Great point. All right, looks like Bernardo's ready with his sideboard. Alexander's still looking at what kind of things he wants to bring in. All right, players are ready. And let's go to the second game. Alexander is up a game over Bernardo. And what kind of opening hands? Looks like both players kept their 7.
And Bernardo on a 2-lander, but this way at least he's less likely to get flooded. Alexander is going to open with a Magmatic Insight here, which is not a bad turn 1 play. And in fact, choosing to discard Cinderglade. So Sylvan Advocate going to get the party started.
And do you think that will meet a roast from Alexander?
Normally that's not the most efficient play, but I think that in order to make sure the board is clear when you're going to curve out, I think that's fine. You basically, you don't mind roasting it, but you'd rather use Fiery Impulse because you're going to have Spell Mastery pretty soon, and Fiery Impulse is only 1 mana. But given that Alexander wanted to spend all his mana, roast it does make sense.
Fortunately for Bernardo, he drew a 3rd untapped land for his turn. That Canopy Vista was not going to enter the battlefield untapped until he had drawn it. So Nissa, Voice of Zendikar entering the battlefield. Alexander playing Tireless Tracker on their turn, but this is turn 3, so he does not have a follow-up land to immediately trigger.
And here, Bernardo's got a couple options here. He can Declaration of Stone, kill the Tireless Tracker, funnily enough, turn it into a clue, which is what it generates anyway. Or he could actually just play a Hangerback for 1 and then Dromoka's Command to fight the Hangerback and put a +1/+1 counter. So it would trade for Tireless Tracker and give 2 tokens. Looks like that may be what he's doing.
And do you think Tireless Tracker is a card that the green-white deck really wants to deal with immediately?
I like killing it immediately. Next turn, if Alexander plays a Nissa's Pilgrimage, then he ends up getting multiple clues off the tracker, and there's just no reason to let your opponent draw a bunch of cards, especially since Dromoka's Command, it's a fine card, but it's not a card you have to save at all costs.
All right, looks like that play is going to be made exactly like you had said. Hangerback Walker for 1, Dromoka's Command fighting off the Tireless Tracker and the Hangerback Walker. And 2 Hello Friends, once again coming. Nissa -2, putting a 1/1 counter on all of Bernardo's creatures now.
Draconic Roar, interesting draw where if Alexander had a Dragonlord Atarka in hand, Draconic Roar could take out that Nissa and one of the tokens, but instead he's just reduced to casting Pilgrimage.
Yeah, Alexander's hand not currently too good versus the mass board creatures that Bernardo's presenting.
Yeah, he's got 2 point removal spells and then a Tormenting Voice, which he's hoping will go a long way. Of course, we saw this last game. Bernardo, his last 3 or 4 draw steps have all been lands.
Mm-hmm. Fortunately, that Nissa is going to do a lot of work, producing another plant token, next turn threatening to stay alive and still putting another 1/1 counter on all of his creatures.
Yeah, Nissa, a huge part of this deck. It really gives this deck a relevant turn 3 play and a play that threatens both control decks and stops aggro decks from attacking you.
All right, looks like Alexander's going to use a Fiery Impulse on one of those 2/2 Thopter tokens. A little bit risky. Of course, Bernardo could have another Dromoka's Command, but fortunately for Alexander, he does not. All right, 3 points of damage, knocking Alexander to 16.
Another land for Alexander. So he's really hoping this Tormenting Voice will go the distance.
Goblin Dark Dweller's not a terrible one. Another land in addition, though.
No, and Dark Dwellers, at the very worst, can just recast a Tormenting Voice if need be. Bernardo's not really pressuring Alexander super hard. He's at 16. Even if Nissa minuses, that means getting attacked for 7 next turn, or 6 even next turn.
Lambholt Pacifist, the draw for Bernardo, though, which is not too shabby. Again, Nissa is going to survive a -2, putting a 1/1 counter on all of his creatures, and Lambholt Pacifist becoming a 4/4, as we had mentioned in the previous game. can attack just by herself.
Yeah, I would expect to see Draconic Roar on the Pacifist here.
And it looks like that indeed. In response to the Nissa -2, we're going to see a Draconic Roar to take out that Lambhold Pacifist. These plants in Thopter are still going the distance, though. This is currently 6 damage. And now, awkwardly enough, Kozilek's return not too good against the current board of Bernardo, should he have drawn it.
No, it's funny though. Fall of the Titans could be cast for 3 here, even without the Surge. You pay 7 mana, X equals 3. That can take out the Thopter, the 3/3 Thopter token, and the Nissa, leaving not a ton of threats left on the board. Goblin Dark Dweller's apparently the option though.
Yeah, a lot of good hits in the graveyard for Alexander. Draconic Roar, Tormenting Voice, Fiery Impulse, Nissa's Pilgrimage, Roast, Magmatic Insight. What card do you expect Alexander to hit here?
Kind of like just Draconic Roaring the Thopter, but otherwise Tormenting Voice is likely the card that, or I guess Magmatic Insight is the same as Tormenting Voice, likely the card that gets you the furthest along. You're taking on a little bit more risk here, and in fact, because of that declaration, which I'm sure Alexander wasn't really considering in his calculations, because it's not a card that they have access to a lot of. Bernardo's going to be able to attack Alexander down to 4 here.
Yeah. Magmatic Insight, followed by Tormenting Voice, finding Alexander a few new cards. Chandra, pretty good versus a massive board, but we'll see what Bernardo wants to do here. Declaration in Stone, as you had mentioned, being used on that Goblin Dark Dwellers, giving Alexander a significant clue, but he's going to be falling down to 4 here after this attack for 6.
Yeah, and the follow-up here of Chandra is pretty good, though. Chandra -3 does clear the board, with Fiery Impulse left just in case. Bernardo's still actually just drawing lands. He's been in the same position both these games, where he's ahead, but just is always lacking like the last threat he needs.
Chandra Flamecaller entering the battlefield immediately using her -3.
Yeah, she's calling 3 flames, and that'll deal 3 to everything, wiping the board, leaving Bernardo with just a lone Nissa. All right, there you go. That is a productive card. Den Protector here can be played face down and flip face up to pick up like a Sylvan Advocate. Probably not a Dromoka's Command, potentially even a Hangerback Walker.
Some good hits here. Considerations for sure. Although Chandra is a pretty fast clock. If Alexander can just stabilize the board a little bit more, he's got some good follow-ups to do so.
He does, and next turn, the Fiery Impulse plus Fall of the Titans could combine for a lot of damage too, if need be.
All right, there's that morphed Den Protector. And then immediately I'm going to use... Let's see what he gets here.
If he's using it immediately, he's picking up one of his threats, and it looks like he's getting the Sylvan Advocate. Yeah. And
currently with more than 6 lands, so Sylvan Advocate is going to be a 4/5 Vigilance for 2. Pretty strong. Nissa upticking, putting another plant on the battlefield, but now it's Alexander's turn. Sacrifices the clue, finds another Tormenting Voice.
So Alexander could play the Fiery Impulse on the Den Protector or the plant, and then, or actually what he could do is he could Fiery Impulse the Den Protector and then Fall the Titans, the Nissa, the Sylvan Advocate plus the Nissa, and then plus Chandra. He could also Fiery Impulse plus Fall the Titans to kill 2 of the creatures, or all 3 of the creatures, and then plus Chandra to kill the Nissa. I think no matter what Alexander does, including starting with this Tormenting Voice, he's going to end up being able to wipe Bernardo's board here, which is not good news for Bernardo.
Another Draconic Roar and another Fall of the Titans. The draws off of that Tormenting Voice. We'll see where this Fall of the Titans is going to surge onto.
For sure the Sylvan Advocate, and then I like Den Protector plus Chandra attack Nissa with both tokens, and then the plant chumping can't stave it, and that leaves Bernardo with a 0/1 plant and 7 lands in play, and that's it.
Would you say that Alexander's firmly planted himself in a good position here?
That is actually something I would say, yes. I will admit that.
Bernardo empty-handed, draw for the turn. Ugh, and he has just been drawing way too many lands.
Has Bernardo drawn a land on his draw step yet this game or this match?
And I'm not sure.
It's possible he's drawn 1 or more.
Mountain the draw for Alexander, and things are quickly returning in his favor. Actually, the previous game, Alexander had fallen down to a similar life total before.
I think exactly 4.
Was it
yeah.
4? Yeah, before taking over. All right, Chandra producing 2 3-1 at red elemental tokens with haste. Lowly Plant probably not wanting to jump in front of one of them quite yet.
And then the follow-up of presumably a World Breaker here just to speed things along.
World Breaker can break hangerbacks, but it can't break a plant token. Oddly enough.
And the plant token is too mighty. All those arms, and they can't shred a single plant. Gideon shows up, but I think it's just going to be too late. Like, Gideon can make a Knight token, but then Fiery Impulse plus Chandra plus Fall of the Titans it's going to be really tough for Bernardo to get out of this.
All right, well, with nothing better to do, Gideon, ally of Zendikar, entering the battlefield, producing a Knight token. Knight ally, even. Another land for Alexander, but I don't think he minds drawing a land right now with his Fall of the Titans in hand.
No, and with 9, 10 mana available, he could Fall the Titans for 8. He could actually get very close to just winning the game on the spot.
All right, opting to use Chandra, -2 to take out both of the creatures on Bernardo's side. Was it possible that he Fiery Impulsed one of the creatures, produced 2 tokens with Chandra, and Fall of the Titans for the win?
I think that would have done it, yeah.
All right, Word Breaker. Entering the red zone, killing Gideon, ally of Zendikar, and just passing the turn.
I guess from Alexander's point of view, it's also entering the rad zone since things are looking pretty good for him.
I'll give you one guess as to what Bernardo drew.
Yeah, he can't see the forest for the trees here. That's all he's got. So World Breaker plus the 2 Chandra tokens combines for 11 damage here, and then he's going to be able to finish things off with Fall of the Titans regardless of how he wants to cast it.
All right, Westville Abbey activation from Bernardo. Going to give him a 1/1 token. Soak up a little damage, potentially.
Yeah, more than likely soaking up a Fiery Impulse.
And indeed, it is a Fiery Impulse from Alexander's side that's going to take out the lowly Human Cleric token from Westville Abbey. 11 damage. Rams in there, putting Bernardo to 2. And Alexander is quick to tap a lot of mana with that Fall of the Titans in hand. There it is, Fall of the Titans. Gonna finish off Bernardo. Alexander wins this match 2-0. Get a look at the players there.
Yeah, and even though I still think green-white tokens is ahead in the matchup overall, it's clearly not by so much that it's unassailable, and Alexander Ivanov was able to take the match 2-0.
Welcome back to the booth here, friends, at coverage of the Magic Online Championship Series. We actually have Marshall Sutcliffe in the red zone now with some playbacks. Let's go over there right now.
All right, thanks, Kenji. Welcome back to the red zone here, and we've got, I've got Oliver 2. He's playing against Mitchell Mander, so let's get into it. I haven't actually had a chance to watch much of this, so we're going to kind of go through it together. It looks like I'm hitting the wrong button there. It's a little slower. All right, so Duskwatch Recruiter start things off for Mitchell Manders. And Oliver starts things off with a Loam Dryad. Well, this looks like a good start for both players, actually. Mitchell's going to continue to stay aggressive, prompt some trades here. Duskwatch Recruiter. This all makes sense. And here's the first collected company of the game. Comes in for Oliver 2. Oliver had a rough start to his tournament here. He started off 0-3 in Legacy. Looking to get back on his feet here. And falling behind pretty quickly as Mitchell Manners keeps the pressure up. But there's another collected company. This is going to be tough. All right, he's going to go ahead and attack with the Eldrazi Sky Spawner. Let's see what happens here. Eldrazi Displacer. This is pretty huge. Oh, wow. Ojutai's command for Oliver 2. That is brutal. Eldrazi Displacer looks like it would have been a pretty good game changer, especially with the especially with like a Cryptolith Rite or something in there. Okay, Sky Spawner comes in there. And this one's actually starting to get fairly close here. Hollowed Moonlight. Wow. Still, it looks like Oliver 2's the one who's turned the corner on Mitchell Manders here. And now look at this board state. How crazy is that? Just a few minutes ago, Oliver was the one who was behind. Turns out a couple of collected companies will get you right out of it. And now he's going to start displacing. A third collected company for Oliver 2. Wow, this is brutal. And you can I think we can see where this is going. And it looks like that's enough. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that did it. So Oliver 2 was able to take that. And I'll tell you, that was game 2. And in fact, the match for Oliver 2. So he was able to win his second standard match here and clean it up.
We actually have some more matches ready, Marshall, if you want.
Awesome. Let's send it back to the booth.
So here we are back in the booth. We actually have Mike Sigrist and Niels Norlander currently playing their standard match, and it's going to be green-white tokens versus four-color rights. So let's go down there right now. As you can see, this board is a little bit gummed up already, both sides of the battlefield filled with creatures. Eldrazi Displacer, a current addition to Niels Norlander's board, while Mike Sigrist has just a bunch of tokens as the green-white tokens deck wants.
It is funny, though, the green-white tokens deck, despite being called green-white tokens, is less about the tokens and more about the planeswalkers. The planeswalkers make the tokens, but the planeswalkers are really what dictate the pace of the game. And speaking of dictating the pace of the game, I'm taking a look at Mike Sigrist's hand. He actually's got a Tragic Arrogance in hand.
Oh.
So that's going to be pretty big if he can cast that next turn and maneuver the board into a situation where he puts Niels down to just an Eldrazi Scion and himself keeping. You can choose Hangerback as an artifact and then another creature as a creature and keep them both.
Devastating. Let's see what Niels can do here. Of course, Eldrazi Displacer, if he's able to potentially combo off next turn, then Mike might not get another turn. I guess we're at the end of Mike's turn. Niels opting to... maybe he wants to sacrifice some Scions and scry a little bit.
He might be able to do that. He also can displace like the Hangerback Walker, which does kill it because it leaves the battlefield and comes back with 0 counters. Sacrificing a Scion will prompt both Catacomb Sifters to scry, and currently Niels doesn't have a ton of excess mana if he wants to cast both Broodmother and Zulaport Cutthroat in the same turn.
Actually, with only Llanowar Wastes and Yavimaya Coast, I don't even think he has enough colored mana currently. All right, we are going to see that Scion being sacrificed.
Oh, interestingly enough, Niels has Negate in his hand, which does mean that he's going to be able to negate a potential Tragic Arrogance. And the existence of Negate, the presence of it, is something that Mike Sigrist knows about because of deck lists. So he's not going to want to just go for Tragic Arrogance, assume it's going to resolve.
Oh, a Cryptolith Rite from Niels.
And he scried that one on top because now it gives him access to so much mana, and he's got a lot of powerful spells that he can play. It also means that flickering Catacomb Sifter in order to make a token is more viable because then you can sack the token to scry for 2 and dig towards Broodmother, dig towards Zulaport Cutthroat.
How important is Cryptolith Rite in this deck? I know it has the name Rites in it, but is it one of the core components? It
is, and I expect to see 4 copies of Cryptolith Rite in most versions. I think that playing 4 copies is not only desirable but optimal. The card is just so powerful. It's a 2-mana card. Like, look at on this board. It's giving access to Niels 7 or 8 mana per turn. Like, that's the kind of power you don't generally find in Standard. So when you do find it, you want to take advantage of it, even if multiple copies of Cryptolith Rite are dead cards, because having 2 in play doesn't do anything different than having 1 in play. It's still a hugely important card for the deck, and also part of why the deck can play Catacomb Sifter and Reflector Mage side by side. Black, green, white, and blue all together.
Cryptolith Rite actually does a pretty decent job of kind of hiding that you're able to cast some additional spells. the negate you were talking about in Niels' hand, kind of masked by the fact that, he doesn't have any lands untapped.
Right, the negate is still active here. So if Sigrist triple blocks something like, say, the Displacer with those Thopter tokens, then Niels will be prompted to use Displacer on one of the tokens. And in order to keep up negate, what he'll want to do is tap 2 Scions for mana, then sacrifice one of them, and then blink one of the Thopter tokens, displace it. So then the Displacer then beats the other 2 Thopters in combat. And then he has 1 untapped Scion, which he can tap for a blue mana and sacrifice in order to cast negate.
All right, so we see one of the Scions tapping mana, then sacrificed. He's going to get 2 Scry triggers here.
It looks like he's keeping Broodmurder there on top.
All right, and just as you said, Niels does make that play, displacing one of the Thopter tokens. Eldrazi Displacer finishing off the other 2, and we move back to Mike Sigrist's turn.
And Sigrist knows that Niels has cards like negate in his deck. So having the 1 Scion untapped, like you said, it's kind of deceptive. He just has 1 Scion untapped. That's all, but that is enough to cast negate. Tap for a blue, sack it for a colorless.
We'll see if Mike can work his way around it.
The unfortunate part for Mike is Tragic Arrogance costs 5 mana. There's really no way to beat negate on mana efficiency. You're just going to have to tap all your mana and hope it resolves. And the thing is, if you're Mike, even if you have a lot of confidence that you're facing a negate, even if you're like 80% sure that Niels has a negate, sometimes that doesn't matter. You just have to cast Tragic Arrogance and just hope it resolves, because if it doesn't resolve, you're just going to lose. Like, Mike's other options are to play Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, or Dromoka's Command, and those aren't unreasonable, but they're not really going to beat the board. So I think that even if you don't think it's going to work, it's 10 or 20% of the time that he doesn't have the negate, depending on where you put it, is still better than casting a Nissa or a Dromoka's Command and really not getting there. On the other hand, he could make a Night token and then +1/+1 and fight the Displacer. That would kill the Eldrazi Displacer, since Niels doesn't have enough mana up to cast that.
Looks like Mike might be doing a little math, looking at this sideboard and the deck list options here. And as you mentioned, he might just have to go for it. He's indeed making Gideon a creature. Seeing probably if Niels might block with that Eldrazi Scion. Though it looks like Niels is perfectly content to just take the 5 damage.
He might be looking to use Dromoka's Command to just fight the Eldrazi Displacer here, which will prompt a negate, but does leave you you have Tragic Arrogance next turn. So, and then thanks to Oath of Nissa, you could actually cast the Nissa even without tapping the correct mana.
That's a great point, Mike, with plenty of lines available to him. Displacer, one of the most important creatures, if not the most important creature in this type of deck. It looks like we're going to lead things off with a negate for Mike Sigrist, following that
Nissa,
attack
rather.
of Gideon. Sorry, Nissa.
And then he's going to keep mana up for Dromoka's Command. Interesting. Displacer, I would be very tempted to Dromoka's Command the Displacer. You could also have Gideon fight Displacer and force Niels to sacrifice Cryptolith, right? That would almost assuredly prompt a negate, and then that sets up a Tragic Arrogance next turn.
So what's Mike's game plan here then, since he just passed the turn without using the Dromoka's Command?
Presumably he's not casting Dromoka's Command anytime soon, and then next turn maybe trying to cast both Dromoka's Command and Tragic Arrogance if he draws a land. The Dromoka's Command loses a lot of utility once the Gideon is no longer active, and once there's Displacer mana up, because if you try to fight Displacer with a Gideon, for example, Displacer can just blink Gideon in response. Displacer is a hugely powerful card. It is the reason this deck is good.
It could be that Mike wants to use the Dromoka's Command to make Niels sacrifice an enchantment. Is that somewhat possible?
Certainly, I think that's going to be one of the modes chosen, but last turn you could actually have Gideon fight and make Mike sacrifice make Niels sacrifice an enchantment at the same time. And we know Niels' hand, we know he has negate, and he would negate that, but that just means that there's the door is open for Tragic Arrogance next turn, whereas now Niels isn't in a position where he has to negate Dromoka's Command. And if you're Niels and you're winning by this much, you really have to keep in mind, how can I lose? And one of the ways you can lose is your opponent resolving Tragic Arrogance.
I think that's something that a lot of Magic players tend to overlook. That, they're so far ahead on board or in position that they don't take those 1% chances that they could lose. They just want to end the game as quickly as possible. But Neil's obviously contemplating the things that Mike could have. And again, players having access to deck lists really helps with that.
So this looks like a displacer activation. What Mike can do here is, if Niels taps all his actual lands instead of tapping his creatures, end of turn, Dromoka's command forcing the sacrifice of right will either prompt a negate or mean that Niels is unable to cast negate, but Island plus Eldrazi sign is already enough. So as long as that island and those Eldrazi signs are sticking around, then Niels could let Dromoka's command resolve.
We'll see if Mike wants to respond with this. I guess his only option is the Dromoka's command, which probably not too relevant here. All right, Displacer doing what it does, taking care of one of those plant tokens from Nissa. And we are going to see an attack.
And part of the reason to displace the plant before blocks is that you know that you can finish off the Nissa given that information.
All right, looks like both Catacomb Sifters are going to be heading the way of Nissa, while Eldrazi Displacer is attacking Gideon, ally of Zendikar.
And that's bad news for Sigrist. Even if he gets to resolve Tragic Arrogance, losing both his Planeswalkers means he's no longer winning post-Arrogance. It's just a push.
So why, if you're Niels, would you leave back the Reflector Mage? Just for the extra mana of Cryptolith, right?
That is presumably the reason he because now he's got 4 mana plus 1 off sacrificing the Scions. He can cast negate and use the Displacer, but we're going to see a negate happen here off Island plus Eldrazi Scion.
Yeah, that end of turn Dromoka's command, putting a 1/1 counter on Eldrazi Displacer and making Niels sacrifice at Cryptolith, right? Tragic Arrogance being cast by Mike now. And like you said, negate off of Scion and Island should be all it takes for Niels to really push forward.
Yeah, and Mike's left with a forest in hand, and he does have another turn. If he draws another Tragic Arrogance, then he might be in a spot where he's able to cast it and still reduce Niels' board, but he only has 1 turn to draw it because he's actually getting attacked by a lot of creatures.
Yeah, 11 points of power on the board for Niels here. Have you found this matchup to play out similarly to this?
I like being on the right side. I played the 4-color rights deck at Grand Prix New York, and I played against multiple green-white decks, and I was able to negate Tragic Arrogance, actually, and that's really the only card that you're really worried about. So I think that the rights deck really has an advantage because of how good Displacer is and how much board presence they're able to make. They just don't care about so much of what the green-white deck is doing. Tragic Arrogance or flipping Avacyn is really the only thing.
End of Mike's turn. It looks like Niels has... Oh, he's just going to use the Displacer to kind of flicker that Sifter. Get an extra Eldrazi Scion. Mike does have Westvale Abbey open to him should he choose to do that, but with that Displacer online, should not matter. All right, we go to Niels' attack, currently for lethal.
And Sigrist is unfortunately able to make a Westvale Abbey token, but Displacer will stop that.
Yeah, and looks like that was only game number 2 from those players, so we're going to get a third game. Back to the booth here for a moment. What kind of things are from the sideboard are these players looking to bring in or pull out?
Well, one of them's bringing Tragic Arrogance, the other's bringing Negate. So those are the main differences in how the matchup plays out between game 1 and game 2, or in this case, game 1 and game 3.
Yeah, right. Showing how powerful it can be. Of course, Collected Company in that deck, finding almost all of the creatures, and just does so much work for the rights deck. Green-white, of course, not running Collected Company. You said the Planeswalkers are the key components to making the tokens for that deck.
Yeah, with Collected Company being a very powerful card, and I think the best card in Standard. So the reason we're seeing a lot of the 4-color rights deck. There's actually a lot in this tournament, even for such a small field. So it's a very proactive and powerful deck, and there's not much it loses to besides the language decks, which we're not seeing very many of either.
Yeah, LSV's keys, as we saw earlier, really helped us understand some of the standard metagame and some of the cards that are...
They're an institution by now, what can I say?
I believe it. I believe it. Looks like a lot of these matches have finished up here. I'll just go through and read off some of these for you. Looks like we saw previously Alexander Ivanov beating Bernardo Santos in our main feature match, green-red goggles ramp versus green-white tokens. Green-white tokens, again, make such a huge appearance in this tournament.
Well, it is, again, I think the default best deck. I do think the Cryptolith right decks are very good, but the green-white tokens deck is certainly a very solid choice because it doesn't really have a terrible matchup. I don't think the matchup's good against the rights deck. I think you'd rather be on the side of rights, but the green-white tokens deck is better against the control decks than the rights is by so much. So if you expect a lot of language decks, you're much better served by playing green-white. It does a very good job against those decks.
And actually, we don't see too many language decks at all in the field today. I know we saw some of the green-black decks. Sam's deck earlier was really awesome, but not running or featuring too many languish. All right, looks like the players are ready here for their game 3, so let's go down to that match real quick. There we are.
And we're going to see Mike Sigrist on the play here. He had to mulligan to 6, unfortunately for him. His opening hand has 2 lands, 2 Den Protectors, Hangerback Walker, and Dromoka's Command. So a decent opening hand, but not really what he's looking for because it doesn't have a Planeswalker. And as good as Den Protector is in the late game, it's not a card you want 2 copies of in your opening hand.
Neil's leading off with that Loam Dryad. A card I don't think many people expected to make its rounds in the standard, but it's really proven itself in these type of decks.
Oh yeah, we had 4 Loam Dryads in our deck at the Pro Tour, and it was a good card. It turns out going that far out of your way to get a Birds of Paradise is worth it, and Loam Dryad, in concert with other creatures, is in fact a non-flying Birds of Paradise.
And I know it's talked about ad nauseum at this point, but Duskwatch Recruit, just one of the best 2-drops that Standard's seen in quite some time. Allows you to do so many things, and it really punishes the opponent too if they don't cast anything. Transforms, and you can just cast out multiple creatures for a reduced cost. Looks like Mike's got that Hangerback Walker on turn 2.
And he has the option of either playing Nissa or a face-down Den Protector here. He could also, if he wants, activate Hangerback, put a +1/+1 counter on it with Dromoka's Command, and fight the Duskwatch Recruiter, and end up with a 3/3 Hangerback in play. But it looks like he's just going with one of his 3 drops, most likely Nissa.
All right, Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, the play for Mike Sigrist, producing that plant token. And we'll see what Niels can counter with.
Yeah, taking a look at what Niels has to work with. Niels has it all. He's got this is the draw you want for company. His hand right now is a Collected Company, a Negate, and a Catacomb Sifter plus lands. And he had the turn 1 Loam Dryad, turn 2 Duskwatch Recruiter. So from Niels' side, I love just going land to go, flip my Duskwatch Recruiter, have mana up for Company or Negate. And in either case, you get to do something very good.
Yeah, and Collected Company. Turn 3, you said, getting that Birds of Paradise type effect is worth it. Loam Dryad proving it's worth here. Should Niels opt to do so.
Yeah, you do have to make some significant mana-based concessions to play a turn 1 Loam Dryad and a turn 2 creature consistently, but it's worth it. Having a turn 3 Collected Company, turn 3 you have 5 or 6 mana worth of creatures off just the company, plus whatever you played on turn 1 and turn 2. It just puts you so far ahead.
All right, looks like Niels is going to, in fact, make that play. Play a land, pass the turn, transform Duskwatch Recruiter into the Kralin Horde Howler. We'll see what Mike can do to kind of combat this. I assume from Mike's position, you just have to, think that Niels has a Collected Company in hand.
Yeah, in most matches of Magic, when your opponent doesn't play anything on 4 mana, you're like, oh, they might just not have a great draw. When they're playing Collected Company decks, it's like, the old sigh go, like, I got nothing, go. And it's like, no, you've got a Collected Company. So here we go.
Yeah, Mike only being able to uptick Nissa, produce another plant token, and we do see that Collected Company now from Niels' side. A second Duskwatch Recruiter, Elvish Visionary.
Hitting a Duskwatch Recruiter Visionary is decent. That's 4 mana worth of spells. it's not as exciting as hitting like a Displacer, which he actually drew off the Elvish Visionary, but it does still pay for the company. Those were the only two options available, and Duskwatch Recruiter, that's going to add up to a significant long game advantage, especially since Sigrist could cast Dromoka's command there, but given that there's two Duskwatch Recruiters in play, essentially, there's not a big purpose to killing one of them.
So it looks like Mike might have not used his Hangerback Walker end of turn.
So Mike passed the turn, Niels cast Company, and then Mike is just keeping all his mana up, keeping all his options open.
Okay.
So Niels, because he's got the Kralin Horde Howler in play, this is a turn where you want to just jump a bunch of creatures. He can actually play Eldrazi Displacer and Catacomb Sifter and Elvish Visionary if he wants to just full on dump his hand. He actually doesn't even have to worry about Tragic Arrogance because Sigrist missed his 4th land drop. So kind of like just playing it all right now. And then next turn you'll have Negate up, and this puts you so far ahead, especially since Niels drew a Brood Monitor off of that Elvish Visionary. So now by playing, just jumping his whole hand, he's going to end up setting up for the combo in a turn or two.
Oh man, I'd call that brutal.
No, that actually I would draw the line at. I would not say that.
Fair enough. Lone Dryad being activated, Eldrazi's Displacer. Niels doesn't want to take that 1 point of damage off the caves.
Though he might end up taking that damage off playing Catacomb Sifter anyway. So I don't know that he, it's 6 one way, half dozen the other. One way or another, he's likely taking damage off caves here because you don't need to leave up Negate here. I guess it's just safer to do so, but I kind of in favor of just slamming the Catacomb Sifter.
Yeah, like you said, Mike missed a land drop and still off of double white, so Tragic Arrogance looking a little bit far from being cast.
It is good to leave Negate up in the case of Dromoka's command. I guess that is a safer play. So what Niels is doing certainly makes sense.
Let's see if Niels wants to attack in here.
You could attack with the Howler. So that lets Hangerback potentially block, get ticked up to a 2/2, then you put a +1 counter on it. But then if you fight the Displacer, it dies anyway, so that you don't actually lose the Kralin Horde Howler in that exchange. Though I believe that the Dromoka's command will get negated if it gets cast here.
All right, looks like the Howler is going to battle in. And you have to remember, this is only turn 4. Niels has quite an impressive board for such an early point in the game.
Yeah, again, the turn 1 Lone Red, turn 2 Duskwatch Recruiter, turn 3 Company, flip Kralin Horde Howler, and play 2 creatures off of it. Just puts you so far ahead here.
All right, Plant meets its doom. Mike gonna pump up the Hangerback Walker at end of Niels' turn.
And I think for mana efficiency purposes and because Displacer is going to be able to protect itself, you have to command now.
All right, so we're going to fight Hangerback Walker to Eldrazi Displacer. Dromoka's command also putting a 1/1 counter on Hangerback Walker, so it would kill it, but that is going to be met with a negate. All right, what kind of things does Mike need to do here to kind of pull back into this game?
Well, hitting a land drop so he can play a Tragic Arrogance in 2 turns would certainly help. He in fact does have the Tragic Arrogance in hand. He just doesn't have the lands to play it. He's kind of locked into just playing face-down Den Protectors, putting in tokens to try to keep Niels' creatures from killing Nissa. But even with all that together, it's going to be really tough for Mike to get back here. Niels is so far ahead. So the pressure's on Niels to finish the game before Mike gets up to Tragic Arrogance mana, which is at the least 2 turns and potentially more than that.
All right, looks like Mike's going to go ahead and play that morphed Den Protector. Niels full commanding position now and tapping with all of his lands and that Eldrazi Displacer.
And Niels has multiple Brood Monitors in hand too. He actually has a 5th land here, so he can just go land, Brood Monitor, go, and then next turn go Catacomb Sifter and start scrying through his deck. He could also just play the Catacomb Sifter and leave up Eldrazi Displacer mana, and then next turn play the Brood Monitor. He's got a couple different ways to approach this here.
Westfell Abbey, the land drop for Niels. And that can also end the game very, very quickly, especially with the amount of tokens that Niels is capable of producing off of those Brood Monitors.
Yeah, and of course, if Niels finds a Cryptolith Rites here, then things just go insane. But even without it, and this is part of why the deck is good, it's lacking Cryptolith Rites, but still is perfectly capable of, assembling a giant board presence and doing a lot of powerful things.
Limited staple Brood Monitor making its appearance.
That was like a Brood Flame Tongue combo. It immediately sacked the 3 tokens to blink the Hangerback Walker, setting up an attack here.
And it looks like Niels is going to go ahead and attack with Displacer and both of his Duskwatch recruiters. Niels very aware of the only morph creature in Mike's deck.
Yeah. Would deck lists make morphs a little bit less mysterious?
No Glacial Stalkers this time. All right, Plant's going to jump in front of the Displacer and the recruiter. Looks like these creatures might be attacking Nissa.
I expect them all to be attacking Nissa.
Indeed they are. All right, and we pass it back to Mike. He's got a little bit of work ahead of him.
Oh, yeah. And given that he's not hitting a land drop this turn either, it's going to be tough for him to get there. It's funny that Den Protector plus Fetch Land is such a key interaction earlier in the format when Khans of Tarkir was legal, and not having Fetch Lands to flip up, didn't pick up with Den Protector is actually very relevant here. If Mike had a Fetch Land in his graveyard and you could flip Den Protector, pick it up, play a 2-drop, that would be such a boon.
Unfortunately for Mike, he doesn't have that luxury. In fact, his hand is Den Protector, Sylvan Advocate, Tragic Arrogance, and a newly drawn Hangerback Walker.
And Hangerback doesn't do a whole lot against Displacer. Mike is under a significant amount of pressure, and it's looking unclear if he's going to get to Tragic Arrogance before this game ends. In fact, it's actually looking unlikely.
And I think even given a normal draw, like you said, the right stack really does have a good strategy against the green-white tokens list.
Yeah, I think this is an above-average draw for rights. Just the turn, anytime you cast Company on turn 3, you're kind of doing it. But it's still just it played a bunch of creatures. It's not really comboing off yet, and the green-white tokens deck's having a hard time. Granted, the green-white tokens deck is missing a lot of land drops. Sigris mulled to 6, kept a 3-lander, and hasn't gotten there since then. But the tokens deck is certainly very far ahead right now.
All right, Sylvan Advocate is going to be the final decision for Mike's turn. We'll see what Niels can put together with his freshly drawn Loam Dryad in addition to the Brood Monitor and Catacomb Sifter in his hand.
Just playing Catacomb Sifter and having Displacer mana up seems like a good place to start. You're protected against Dromoka's command. You can go off end of turn to find Zulaport Cutthroat, and then next turn you'll be able to drain your opponent out. And again, the combo here is you use Displacer on Brood Monitor. It gets you 3 Scions when it enters the battlefield, and then you sack all 3 Scions to Displacer again. That gives you infinite scries if you have Catacomb Sifter in play, which finds Zulaport Cutthroat, which gives you infinite drain life triggers on your opponent.
Niels has almost all of the necessary components here. We'll see what he opts to do this turn.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty clear Catacomb Sifter just because that sets up the combo next turn. It gives Sigris the least amount of time.
And it is Catacomb Sifter for Niels. And he can even flicker that once, get a scry and get a new Eldrazi Scion token should he want to.
And then maybe you just don't even attack. I don't know that it's necessary to pressure the Nissa. It's not like Nissa's very close to ultimating here. She's -7 to ultimate, so and right now it only draw like 3 cards and and gain 3 life because he only has 3 lands in play.
So if you're Niels at this point, again, you just don't worry about the Nissa and you kind of just try to draw into the combo pieces. Oh, or maybe not.
Apparently, if you're Niels, you just attack with everything. I like it.
Using good use of that attack all function.
I like right-click attack with everything. I think my inclination would have been to stay back and just win the game next turn, but hey, you can also attack with everything. That is always a legal option.
All right, well, more blocking the Loam Dryad, Sylvan Advocate, threatening to eat a Duskwatch Recruiter here, but this is currently 3, 6, 8, 10 damage getting through. All of these creatures are currently going at Nissa, though, so Nissa is going to bite the dust.
Interesting. So Niels is sacrificing the Scion, so he's going to use Displacer now, presumably. So he's blinking his Brood Monitor during combat, but they're still going to take down Nissa.
Okay, Brood Monitor producing 3 tokens. 3 scries go on the stack from that Catacomb Sifter.
And presumably scrying to the bottom until he finds the Zulaport Cutthroat here.
So 3 scries to the bottom. And then looks like he's going to get 2 more scries once combat damage resolves.
Well, I think part of the reason he's going off mid-combat here is so he can blink his own Duskwatch Recruiter or blink the Den Protector or something like that.
Ah, sure.
Certainly possible.
Again, for those of you at home, Eldrazi Displacer, Brood Monitor, and then the Scry triggers from the Catacomb Sifter currently doing what they do.
Yeah, there's a loop that, because of Catacomb Sifter, lets you scry through your whole deck. Find Zulaport Cutthroat is the key card here. Though, even without Zulaport Cutthroat, Niels would win this game via attacking fairly quickly. Cutthroat just means that you don't lose to a random Tragic Arrogance.
Looks like Niels still has not found that that Zulaport Cutthroat he's looking for.
One of the skills of playing this deck on Magic Online is being efficient with the way you stack everything, and you see that Niels actually stacking everything, all the scries at once now.
Currently have 9 triggers on the stack for the Scry.
Yeah, he's literally sifting through his deck, but he should find Zulaport Cutthroat pretty quickly here. And the combo is part of the reason that this deck beats Green-White, though I actually think that you don't need the full combo to beat them. Part of the reason that me and Josh Utterlayton played 4-color Rights with Atarka instead of the combo was that we figured just casting Atarka was good enough. Which, yeah, if you've ever blinked an Atarka, that is good times.
I've not done so, but that certainly seems like it would feel good.
All right, so we found a Zulaport Cutthroat. So Niels is now putting the Zulaport Cutthroat on top of his deck. And then he's going to use Displacer during combat on the Den Protector.
Oh, that makes sense. It saves the Loam Dried and also means that Mike can't flip over the Morph and get some extra value. Although I'm not even sure that would matter at this point.
Den Protector gets exiled, returned, tapped, and Nissa dies, and then Catacomb Sifter scries again.
Do you think he's going to scry it to the bottom this time?
I think he's probably going to keep it.
We'll see what Mike wants to do here.
Well, Mike wants to play 2 lands at the same turn so he can cast Tragic Arrogance because he drew Fortified Village, but he's still mana away. So, unfortunately for Mike, it's just not going to get there here. And because Niels flipped Den Protector, Mike cannot unmorph Den Protector to get Dromoka's command back to try to even disrupt the combo. So I would expect Mike to concede to the combo here. Or at least has a good chance of doing so.
All right. Passes the turn. Duskwatch Recruiter transforming. Draw phase. Zulaport Cutthroat. I think that card's pretty good here.
That will finish the game.
And once again, we see the power of Eldrazi Displacer, Brood Monitor, and Zulaport Cutthroat working in tandem.
And here's the Displacer activated on Brood Monitor. And looks like Mike Sigrist is going to concede.
And that is the match. Niels takes it 2-1 over Mike Sigrist. Alrighty. And that'll do it for round 5 here at the Magic Online Championship Series. Don't go anywhere, folks. Thanks for tuning in.
Ultra Pro